Hi, I'm Nat, and today I want to talk about a new proposed legislation coming out of Alberta, Canada that would put some drug users on involuntary treatment. And if you live in any major Canadian city, you know that for years now there's been an addiction pandemic that is ravaging cities and people that live within them, both the users and just regular citizens. So let's see what this proposal is about, and I'll give you my thoughts of why, while it might seem like a good idea on the surface level, it is essentially just a terrible idea and completely infringes on bodily autonomy and people's rights and freedoms, once again, even if it is coming from the United Conservative Party of Alberta. So let's look at what it is first. So it was first published in the Globe and Mail, and the Alberta government is considering introducing a law that would broaden the circumstances under which people with severe drug addictions would be placed into treatment without their consent. Remember when things were being done without our consent during the past 3 years of lockdown? The legislation would be the first involuntary treatment law in Canada to target addiction specifically. Some jurisdictions, including Alberta, already use mental health law to push people into drug treatment without court orders in exceptionally severe situations. But otherwise, adult drug users can refuse help. Government documents obtained by the Globe and Mail through an access to information request suggest the potential change in Alberta would give police, as well as family members or legal guardians of drug users, sweeping rights to refer adults and youth to involuntary treatment if they pose risks to themselves or others. So not if they have done something that risks themselves or others, but might. That's the issue here. It's pre-crime, basically. The United Conservative Party government under Premier Danielle Smith refers to the potential legislation as the Compassionate Intervention Act. Remember how they use really nice flowery words to, like, destigmatizing drug use? That also wasn't a very good idea, because now drug users feel like you don't really care about them, and you're saying, yes, go do that terrible thing, because we don't want to stigmatize the terrible thing and therefore encourage others to also do it and for you to keep doing it if you are addicted to it. The documents, which cover the time period from October, suggest the government expected to introduce the bill in the legislature at some point this year. And they're saying that the government has explored a variety of options, including the potential development of a Compassionate Intervention Act, but no decisions have been made by the government of Alberta. And here they're discussing about just the paperwork and the costs and etc. Within the documents is a review of existing laws in Australia, Portugal, Massachusetts, and Washington State. That review includes details of a proposed process for Alberta to use in deciding whether to grant applications for involuntary treatment. An administrative panel and potentially a separate Indigenous-focused panel would hear those applications. This would be similar to what is done in Portugal. And that is a big mistake that British Columbia made by decriminalizing all drugs and then not having anything in place to support people. It's just go get it. So we're having an influx. I'm in British Columbia. We're having an influx of people from other provinces flock and condense in British Columbia. They're passing through Alberta sometimes. So now we're having a condensed population of drug users with mental health issues with the potential of causing harm to themselves or others just in one place at the same time. And now we want to introduce legislation that would involuntarily put them into treatment. And you conveniently have them all rounded up in the same place. See, it gets tricky. The allowable periods of confinement in the province and whether they could be extended was to be determined at the time. There's an outline of how they would do it. So the records say drug users could be forced into treatment after committing non-violent criminal or statutory offenses, primarily as a result of substance use disorder or when law enforcement, family members, or legal guardians believe they are at risk of serious harm to themselves or others. Believe, that's the problem. It's the believe they are at risk. I think we already have a good system in place in Canada and the United States, etc., where if you commit a crime related to drug use, then yes, you should be put through the court system and then offered a reduced sentence if you complete treatment successfully. that has been a good actual harm reduction policy that had been in place. The problem is that thanks to things like defund the police, and we have also lowered police standards, thanks to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and because we want to hire everybody now, and maybe not qualify them or help them be as good as a police officer as they can be, well, now police are scared or don't have the tools to actually police things. I mean, I know of, for example, restaurant owners that have had people do number 2 in front of their restaurants, and when they call the police say, well, there's nothing really we can do about it because we're told not to stigmatize the user or the homeless person or the mentally ill person. But in reality, it's just causing more issues for everybody. So, I mean, yes, if you do commit a crime due to drug use, then put all of those measures in place where you go through the court system, get the actual crime you committed, and then given the option to do treatment for a reduced sentencing. The leader of the NDP says that, Rachel Notley, says that drug poisonings have devastated families, but the changes are being too punitive. And that's the problem. In Canada, we either have it's terrible, lock them all up and put them in involuntary treatment, or destigmatize, decriminalize, and just let them do whatever they want and don't police any crimes at all. And we have a catch and release bail system where people then commit even worse crimes because judges and police have essentially been left with no other tools to deal with the situation. Imprisoning Albertans against their will for addiction treatment is doomed to failure, both from a treatment perspective and a legal one. That's true, and the most effective treatments are when people choose to go to treatment because it's a personal thing. But again, when you're telling people that it's already stigmatized and it's not such a bad thing what they're doing, and now you've decriminalized all the drugs for them, well, there's less of an incentive to seek help if you are being told that what you're doing is not harmful or not bad for you. But then rounding you up without you ever having committed a real crime is also not a good idea because it infringes on your bodily autonomy and your rights and freedoms. So I think we've put ourselves, or they've put us in Canada, in a catch-22. And the results or the actual purpose might be a little bit more nefarious because, as I mentioned, if you round everybody up in major cities, or at least in the west sides provinces like Alberta and British Columbia has already decriminalized all the drugs, all the use of drugs, well, then you have them all in one convenient space for when you want to enact policies like this. You can just essentially round everybody up and throw them in treatment without them having committed any crime or having had any real impact that is criminal upon society. One report in their Alberta documents highlights the fact that several rights protected in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms are potentially at odds with involuntary treatment, including the right to life, liberty, and security, and the right not to be arbitrarily detained, which were kind of broken a little bit during the lockdowns. But again, it's the same side of it's the opposite sides of the same coin. Sorry. And it's different with young people because children cannot consent. Here it says in Alberta, since 2006, has allowed parents or guardians to petition courts to put them into involuntary treatment. And this also goes into the whole issue of children consenting. It is very different from adults. Children cannot consent to drugs. They shouldn't be able to. Children cannot consent to chop off their body parts in the name of gender ideology either, or consent to sex with adults, which is something also that is being thrown around now because of people wanting to think children can consent to things that they can't. The province's existing Mental Health Act allows for involuntary detainment only in extreme cases when healthcare providers deem people to be at risk of suffering significant mental or health, physical deterioration, or causing harm to others. People designated under the Act who are using substances have the right to refuse drug treatment if they have the capacity to understand the risks of drug use. So, if you want to keep doing what you're doing, then go ahead. But also, don't have a government that essentially encourages you to keep going and tells you that they don't really care about you because they're destigmatizing the terrible thing that you're doing. BC Premier David Eby has said he believes creating more involuntary treatment programs in facilities such as Redfish Healing Center is one way to improve public safety, while helping a small group of repeat violent offenders, most of whom are experiencing homelessness, mental health issues, and addiction, or all three potential crises at once. Mr. Eby told the Globe's editorial board earlier this year that he wants to expand the scope of the province's Mental Health Act. And again, those measures are in place. If you commit a crime, then get a reduced sentence if you go to treatment, if it is drug-related. And don't catch and release criminals, basically, on bail, and don't put the judges in those positions, and don't put the police's work, but don't make the police's work essentially useless, because they're going to have to catch that criminal over and over again. And it is because they have either drug addiction or mental health, or most of the cases, essentially both. So, no, putting people's bodily autonomy at risk and infringing on charter rights and freedoms is not a good idea if you're doing it for the jabby jab, or if you're doing it to help with the whole drug addiction and drug use pandemic in Canada. Again, there are solutions already there. And we could be potentially looking at, if they're already talking about this in BC as well, why did they decriminalize all the drugs? Maybe to gather everybody in the same place. We've already seen, again, as I said, an influx into the province of British Columbia of drug users from other provinces coming here. It's very convenient to have them all in one place. So it doesn't matter who it's coming from, if it's from the party you support or the party you're completely against. Infringing on people's bodily autonomy is never a good idea. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.